The conference room aboard Galactic Council Station Theta gleamed with the cold light of 1,000 stars visible through its transparent dome. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood alone at the human delegation table, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. Across the circular chamber, representatives from 47 species watched him with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. High Executor Krath of the Vryn hegemony rose from his seat, his scaled body towering nearly 3 meters tall, his yellow eyes fixed on Webb with barely concealed disdain. The translator device around his thick neck crackled to life. 6 months, Krath said, his voice a rasping growl that echoed through the chamber. 6 months we have given you primitives to accept reality. Your colonies in the outer reach belong to Vryn space. You will surrender them or we will take them. Webb stepped forward, keeping his voice steady. High Executor, those colonies have been human settlements for over 80 years. 20 million people call those worlds home. We have shown you the original settlement charters, the surveys that prove no other species claimed that space. We are willing to negotiate resource sharing, establish joint development zones, anything to avoid conflict. Krath's laugh was a terrible sound, like stones grinding together. Several other delegates joined him. The Kelthran representative, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell, pulsed with what the translator interpreted as amusement. Negotiate? Krath moved around the table, his clawed feet clicking on the polished floor. You have nothing to negotiate with, human. Your species has been in space for what? 300 years? We have ruled our corner of the galaxy for 15,000. Your ships are slow, your weapons primitive, your people soft. He stopped directly in front of Webb, looking down at him. You are children playing with toys you barely understand. Webb met his gaze without flinching. We are a peaceful people, High Executor. But we will defend our citizens. With what? Krath spread his arms wide, addressing the entire council now. Shall we review the facts? The human fleet consists of 247 warships. The Vryn hegemony commands over 3,000. Human vessels require 4 days to charge their jump drives. Ours require 6 hours. Human kinetic weapons have an effective range of 50,000 kilometers. Our plasma lances can strike from 300,000. He turned back to Webb. You have 1 week to evacuate your colonies. After that, any human presence in the outer reach will be considered an act of war and dealt with accordingly. An elderly being in the corner of the room stood up slowly. Zixthar was older than most species' recorded histories, a member of the Architects, one of the first races to achieve interstellar travel. His form was vaguely humanoid but seemed to shimmer, as if not quite solid. When he spoke, everyone listened. High Executor Krath, I would counsel caution, Zixthar said, his voice like wind through ancient trees. There are records, old records, that suggest— Records? Krath cut him off. Ancient myths and legends? I deal in facts, old one. The facts are clear. Humanity is weak. They will bend, or they will break. He looked at Webb one final time. 1 week, Ambassador. Tell your leaders to make the wise choice. The session ended. Webb walked through the corridors of the station alone, his mind racing. He had been a diplomat for 30 years, had negotiated treaties with a dozen species, and had always found a way to avoid bloodshed. But this was different. Krath wanted this war. The Vryn had been expanding aggressively for decades, and the Council did nothing because the Vryn were powerful, and their victims were always smaller, weaker species. He reached the human embassy section and went straight to the secure communication room. The quantum link to Earth took only seconds to establish. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Sarah Chen, commander of the Human Confederacy Fleet. She was younger than Webb, barely 50, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. They rejected everything, Webb said without preamble. Krath is determined. 1 week to evacuate 20 million people or they attack. Chen's expression didn't change. Can we evacuate in time? No. Even if we had enough ships, which we don't, most of those people have lived their entire lives on those worlds. They won't want to leave, and even if they did, where would they go? Earth is overcrowded. Mars is at capacity. We'd be creating a refugee crisis. Then we fight, Chen said simply. Webb shook his head. Sarah, you heard Krath's numbers. We're outgunned, outmatched. If we fight, we lose, and not just the colonies. They'll come for Earth next. Maybe, Chen said. Maybe not. Something in her tone made Webb pause. What aren't you telling me? Chen was quiet for a moment. Marcus, you've known me for 20 years. In all that time, have you ever wondered why someone like me with my background became fleet commander? You graduated top of your class at the Naval Academy. Your tactical simulation scores were legendary. That's the official story, Chen said. The truth is more complicated. There are things about the fleet, about our capabilities that even you don't know. Things that the civilian government doesn't know. Things we've kept hidden since humanity first reached the stars. Webb felt cold. What kind of things? The kind that make Krath's numbers meaningless, Chen said. Marcus, our ancestors learned a hard lesson over thousands of years of history. We're good at war, too good. When we finally reached space, when we joined the galactic community, we made a choice. We would hide what we were capable of. We would appear weak, primitive, harmless. We thought if we did that, if we made ourselves seem not worth fighting, we could finally leave our violent past behind. You're saying our fleet is more capable than we've let on? Much more, Chen confirmed. But if we reveal that now, if we show what we can really do, there's no going back. The galaxy will see us differently, fear us, maybe unite against us. That's why we need authorization from the highest level. Webb understood. I'll contact President Okafor immediately. Do it fast, Chen said. And Marcus? One more thing. Try to find out what Zixthar knows. If the architects have old records about us, we need to know what they say. The connection ended. Webb sat in the darkness of the communication room, trying to process what he'd learned. Humanity had been lying to the galaxy for 3 centuries. What else had been hidden? He spent the next 3 days in frantic activity. President Okafor listened to his report and Chen's revelations with a grave expression. The decision went to the full Council of Earth, the body that governed all of humanity. The debate was fierce. Some argued for evacuation and surrender. Others wanted to reveal humanity's true strength. But everyone agreed on one thing. They would not abandon 20 million citizens without a fight. Meanwhile, Webb tried to contact Zixthar, but the old architect had left the station. Webb managed to trace him to a meditation sanctuary on one of the station's outer rings. He found Zixthar floating in a chamber filled with starlight, his form barely visible. Ambassador Webb, Zixthar said without turning around, you seek answers about your people. You started to say something in the council chamber. About old records. Zixthar finally turned to face him. 50,000 years ago, my people encountered a species on a blue world orbiting a yellow star. They were primitive, still fighting with crude weapons, still divided into tribal groups. But they were remarkable, persistent, creative, dangerous. My ancestors studied them for many generations and left one simple instruction in our archives. Leave them alone. Do not interfere. If they survive long enough to reach the stars, they will be worth knowing. If they do not, they were never meant for this stage. Webb felt his breath catch. You're talking about Earth, about humans. Yes, Zixthar confirmed. But there was something else in those records. A warning. Your species has an unusual capacity for violence. Most species develop technology and civilization by cooperation. Humans did it through competition, conflict, war. You are persistence hunters on an evolutionary level. You don't give up. You don't forgive. And you never ever forget. The old being moved closer. The Vrin are making a mistake. They see your patience as weakness. They don't understand that patience is how you hunt. Why didn't you tell the council this? Would they have listened? Most species live for a few decades, maybe a century or two. Their memory is short. They see only what is in front of them. The Vrin have been powerful for 15,000 years. They cannot imagine being anything else. But my people have seen empires rise and fall for 100,000 years. We know that power is temporary. Principle endures. Webb left the sanctuary with more questions than answers. He reported everything to Earth and to Admiral Chen. The decision was made. Humanity would not evacuate. They would not surrender. They would defend their people. On the 6th day, Webb requested one final meeting with High Executor Krath. The Vrin agreed, seeming amused that the human was still trying. They met in a private chamber, just the two of them and their translators. Krath lounged in a seat designed for his massive frame, completely relaxed. Have you come to announce your surrender? Krath asked. No, Webb said quietly. I've come to ask you one last time to reconsider. Withdraw your ultimatum. Let us resolve this peacefully. There's still time to avoid war. Krath's laughter filled the room. You actually believe you can fight us? You actually think your primitive fleet can stand against the Vryn hegemony? He leaned forward. Ambassador Webb, I almost pity you. You seem like a reasonable being. It's unfortunate you were born to such a weak species. Webb looked at him for a long moment. High Executor, I've been negotiating with other species for 30 years. I've learned that every culture has different values, different perspectives. But I've also learned that there are certain universal truths. One of them is this. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. What does that mean? Krath asked, his translator struggling with the idiom. It means you're about to make the biggest mistake of your civilization's history, Webb said. And I'm truly sorry for that. He left the chamber. 6 hours later, the Vryn Third Fleet, 300 warships strong, entered human space and jumped toward New Brisbane, one of the oldest and largest colonies in the Outer Reach. The attack came without warning. Plasma lances burned through the atmosphere. Kinetic bombardment cracked the planet's crust. New Brisbane's small defense force of 12 ships fought bravely, but were destroyed in minutes. The orbital stations were shattered. The cities below were targeted with precision weapons. When it was over, 2.3 million people were dead. Men, women, children. Entire families vaporized. Schools, hospitals, homes reduced to radioactive craters. The Vryn broadcasted their attack across all frequencies, a message to humanity. Submit, or this is your future. On Earth, in the command center deep beneath Geneva, Admiral Sarah Chen received the casualty reports. Her face remained calm, but her hands gripped the edge of the console until her knuckles turned white. Around her, officers waited in shocked silence. The quantum communication system came to life. Every human military installation across known space was on the line. Fleet commanders, station captains, special forces units, research facilities, all waiting for orders. Chen took a deep breath and opened the channel. Her voice was steady, cold as the void between stars. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, Fleet Commander of the Human Confederacy. As of this moment, Doctrine Midnight is in effect. All protocols are active. All restrictions are lifted. Authorization code, Enduring Dawn 77 Alpha Zeta. She paused, and when she spoke again, every human in space heard the words that would change the galaxy forever. Send one final transmission to Vryn High Command. Tell them this: you wanted to start this war? Then see what follows. Across human space, warships that had seemed slow and primitive began to change. Hulls opened to reveal weapon systems that had been hidden for centuries. Engines that had been throttled to appear weak roared to full power. Computers loaded combat algorithms developed from 10,000 years of human warfare. Soldiers who had trained in secret activated equipment the galaxy had never seen. The mask was off. Humanity was done hiding, and the Vryn hegemony was about to learn why ancient species had left Earth alone. The Vryn Third Fleet remained in orbit around New Brisbane for 6 hours after the bombardment, their ships arranged in a victory formation. High Executor Krath had ordered them to stay, to make sure the message was clear. Let the humans see their fleet in the skies above their ruined colony. Let them understand their powerlessness. Fleet Commander Rack stood on the bridge of his flagship, the mighty dreadnought Talon of Empire, watching the burning planet below. He felt satisfaction. The humans had needed this lesson. Now they would surrender, and the Vryn could expand into their territory without further resistance. Commander, his sensor officer called out, I'm detecting something unusual. What is it? Rax asked, not really interested. Probably some debris from the orbital stations. Multiple jump signatures. At least 60 contacts. Oh wait, more appearing, 80, 100. The officer's voice rose. Commander, they're everywhere. I count 147 ships, all human signatures, all dropping out of jump space around us. Rax spun toward the display. That was impossible. Intelligence said the nearest human fleet was 4 days away. Their jump drives were slow. They couldn't have gotten here this fast. He stared at the tactical screen as ship after ship appeared, forming a perfect sphere around his fleet. Hail them, Rax ordered. Demand their surrender. Before his communication officer could comply, every screen on the bridge lit up with the same image.
A human female in a dark uniform, her face emotionless, her eyes cold. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Confederacy, she said.
You have 60 seconds to begin powering down your weapons and engines. After that, we will consider you hostile and respond accordingly. Rax laughed. You dare threaten us? You're outnumbered more than 2 to 1. Your ships are inferior. Surrender now and we might let your crews live. Chen's expression didn't change. 50 seconds. All ships, Rax commanded, target the human vessels. Prepare to fire on my mark. The Vryn fleet pivoted, their massive weapons arrays tracking the smaller human ships. Rax watched his tactical display with confidence. Yes, the humans had more ships than expected, and yes, they had arrived faster than should have been possible, but the outcome was certain. Vryn ships were bigger, stronger, more heavily armed. 40 seconds, Chen's voice echoed across all channels. Fire, Rax said. 300 Vryn warships unleashed their plasma lances simultaneously. The void lit up with destruction. Rax smiled. The humans would learn this lesson the hard way. Then his smile faded. The tactical display was still showing all human ships intact. Green, active, unharmed. What happened? He demanded. Why didn't we hit them? Sir? His weapons officer stammered. The targeting computers say we achieved direct hits, but the sensors show no damage. It's like they're not there. They're projecting false positions, the sensor officer said, understanding dawning in his voice. Sir, those aren't their real locations. We're shooting at ghosts. Time's up, Chen said. The human ships opened fire, but these weren't the primitive kinetic weapons the Vryn had expected. These were something else entirely. Railguns accelerated projectiles to a fraction of light speed. Missiles locked onto targets using quantum entanglement, impossible to jam or deceive. And then there were weapons the Vryn didn't even recognize. Beams that passed through shields as if they weren't there and tore ships apart from the inside. The Talon of Empire shuddered as impacts hammered its hull. Rax watched in disbelief as two of his cruisers simply exploded. Their fusion cores breached. A dreadnought broke in half. Smaller ships tried to run, but the human vessels were faster than anything he'd seen. They moved like predators, working in perfect coordination, picking off targets with surgical precision. Return fire, Rex screamed. All ships, evasive maneuvers. But it was useless. The humans had already mapped every Vryn ship's position, trajectory, and shield frequency. Every shot they fired hit home. The Vryn fired blindly at ghost images while real human ships danced through their formations untouchable. In 15 minutes, the battle was over. Of the 300 Vryn ships, 247 were destroyed. The rest, including the Talon of Empire, were crippled, their engines dead, their weapons offline. Rax sat in the darkness of his ruined bridge, emergency lights casting red shadows, and tried to understand what had happened. A human ship approached, much smaller than his dreadnought but somehow more menacing. Chen's face appeared on his screen again. You will order all surviving vessels to power down completely, she said. Rescue shuttles are already recovering your survivors from the destroyed ships. They will be treated as prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention. Do you understand? Rax could barely speak. How did you do this? You assumed we were primitive because we appeared primitive, Chen said. That was your first mistake. Your second was thinking we'd be an easy target. Your third was killing 2.3 million civilians. Her voice hardened. There won't be a fourth mistake, Commander Rax, because you and your fleet are no longer a threat. The transmission ended. Rax gave the order to surrender. He had no choice. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread rapidly. At first, most species didn't believe it. The Vryn Third Fleet destroyed? Impossible. But the evidence was undeniable. Wreckage floated in New Brisbane's orbit. The human ships jumped away as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving only a message buoy broadcasting footage of the battle. On Galactic Council Station Theta, an emergency session was called. Delegates arrived in a panic. If the humans could defeat the Vryn that decisively, what did it mean for galactic politics? What else had humanity been hiding? Ambassador Webb stood before the council again, but this time no one was laughing. High Executor Krath was there too, his scales pale with rage. Your people have committed an act of war, Krath roared. We will mobilize the full might of the hegemony. We will crush Earth itself, will you? Webb asked quietly. The entire chamber went silent. High Executor, let me tell you what's happening right now, while we waste time here. The Vryn Fifth Fleet is currently in the Kepler sector, yes? 18 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, hundreds of support ships. Your largest fleet. Krath's eyes narrowed. That information is classified. Not to us, Webb continued. Right now, human task forces are hitting your supply convoys across 7 systems. You have 43 major logistics hubs. We've destroyed 11 of them in the last 2 hours. Your communications relay in the Tarsus Nebula went offline 6 minutes ago. The mining operation on Vraxis Thor stopped producing 30 minutes ago. Shall I go on? The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Webb pulled up a holographic display showing a map of Rin space. Red markers indicated human attacks. There were dozens of them. You see, Webb said, we don't fight like you fight. We don't mass our fleets and charge at each other. We studied you, High Executor. We studied all of you. He gestured to the other delegates. For 300 years we watched. We learned. We saw how your wars work, how your tactics function, how your societies organize their militaries, and we prepared. This is terrorism, Krath spat. Attacking civilian targets. We've attacked only military installations and logistics, Webb corrected. Our rules of engagement are very specific. No civilian casualties unless absolutely necessary to prevent greater harm. Every target we've hit has been purely military. Unlike your attack on New Brisbane. A delegate from the Kelthran Collective spoke up, its energy form pulsing with concern. Ambassador Webb, what exactly is Doctrine Midnight? Webb had been waiting for this question. 307 years ago, when humanity first developed faster-than-light travel, we held a global conference. Every nation on Earth sent representatives. We asked ourselves a simple question. What kind of species do we want to be among the stars? Our history was violent. We fought wars for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times with nuclear weapons, biological weapons, weapons we pray you never have to see. We were good at killing each other. Too good. He paused, making sure everyone was listening. We decided we wanted to be better. We wanted peace. But we also knew that the galaxy might not let us have peace. So we made a contingency plan. We would build a fleet that appeared primitive, limited, weak. We would join the galactic community as students, not conquerors. We would hide our true capabilities. But if anyone forced us into a war we didn't want, if anyone threatened our people with extinction, we would activate Doctrine Midnight. We would reveal what we really are. And what are you really? Zixthar asked from the back of the chamber. Webb met his gaze. We're the species that survived 10,000 years of warfare. We're the species that turned the atom itself into a weapon. We're the species that looked at our own capacity for destruction and chose to restrain it. But restraint is not the same as inability, and patience is not the same as weakness. He turned back to Krath. You wanted this war. You killed our people. Now you see what follows. Krath's communication device beeped. He answered it, and his face went even paler. This is impossible, he whispered. What is? Webb asked, though he already knew. The Fifth Fleet, Krath said, his voice hollow. It's gone, all of it. Destroyed in a coordinated attack. Over 500 ships. How many vessels do you have? Webb smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That's classified. The truth was more complex than Webb let on. The human fleet didn't actually have thousands of ships. They had roughly 300 combat-capable vessels, but each one was worth 10 Vrin ships in firepower, speed, and capability. More importantly, they fought smart. Human tacticians had spent centuries studying military history, not just their own, but from every species they encountered. They knew how to use terrain, how to create distractions, how to make one force seem like five. And they had advantages no other species could match. Human pilots could endure more G-forces than most aliens. Human reaction times were faster. Human pattern recognition was superior. Humans could survive injuries that would kill other species. They healed faster. They adapted quicker. These weren't things you could see on a technical specification sheet, but in combat they mattered. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the HCSS Endurance, watching tactical reports flow in from across Vrin space. Her fleet had split into dozens of task forces, each one striking multiple targets before jumping away. The Vrin were trying to respond, but they couldn't predict where the humans would hit next. Their command structure was too rigid, too hierarchical. By the time orders came down from high command, the humans were already gone. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the Vrin are pulling their fleets back to defend their core worlds. Let them, Chen said. That's exactly what we want. Every ship they recall is a ship that's not threatening our colonies. They're also calling for help, the communications officer added. Broadcasting requests to their allies, Chen nodded. She'd expected this. The Vrin had 3 major allied species and a dozen minor ones. If they all joined the war, the numbers could become overwhelming even for humanity. Any responses? She asked. None so far, the officer replied. In fact, several species are publicly announcing their neutrality. That made sense. The galaxy was watching humanity dismantle the Vryn military with terrifying efficiency. Why would anyone want to be next? The aliens had assumed humans were weak. Now they were learning otherwise. And they were scared. Chen felt the weight of that fear. This was why Doctrine Midnight had been a last resort. This was why humanity had hidden for 3 centuries. Fear led to hatred. Hatred led to alliances. If the galaxy united against humanity out of fear, even Earth's capabilities might not be enough. But she also felt anger. Anger for the children of New Brisbane who would never grow up. Anger for the families torn apart. Anger for a war that should never have happened. The Vryn had forced this. They had shown the galaxy what humanity could do. There was no putting that genie back in the bottle. Continue operations as planned, Chen ordered. Hit them hard, hit them fast, and give them no time to recover. But remember the rules of engagement. Military targets only. We're not like them. Across the fleet, her orders were carried out with precision. Human ships struck like lightning, destroying Vryn military assets while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. It made the war harder, slower, more dangerous for human personnel. But it also made a statement. Humanity could win this war without becoming monsters. On a research station orbiting Jupiter, a facility that officially didn't exist, scientists worked on projects that made Doctrine Midnight possible. Dr. Elena Volkov stood in front of a massive computer core, reviewing data from the recent battles. Her team had developed the quantum entanglement targeting system that made human missiles impossible to evade. They'd created the holographic projection technology that let human ships appear to be somewhere they weren't. They'd figured out how to crack Vryn shield frequencies, but she took no joy in it. Every battle report that came in meant people were dying. Yes, mostly Vryn, and yes, they had started this war, but they were still living beings. She'd gone into science to build things, to discover, to create. Now her creations were weapons. Her assistant, a young man named Chen, entered the lab. Doctor, the Admiral is asking for an update on Project Reaper. Volkov closed her eyes. Reaper was the darkest part of Doctrine Midnight. Special forces units trained for operations no one wanted to think about. Surgical strikes behind enemy lines. Elimination of key targets. The kind of missions that won wars but haunted those who carried them out. Tell her the first teams are ready for deployment, Volkov said. And tell her I hope to God she doesn't need to use them. In his private chambers aboard the Vryn flagship Dominion, High Executor Krath stared at tactical displays that showed nothing but disaster. In 2 weeks, humanity had destroyed or crippled a third of his fleet. His supply lines were in chaos. His communications were unreliable. His allies were abandoning him. And the humans showed no signs of slowing down. An aide entered nervously. High Executor, the Council of Wardens is calling for an emergency session. They want to discuss peace negotiations. Peace? Krath's voice was venomous. We cannot show weakness. We cannot let these primitives dictate terms. With respect, sir, we're losing. Badly. Our projections show that if the war continues at this rate, we'll be unable to defend our homeworld within 3 months. Krath wanted to rage, to order the aide executed for defeatism, but he couldn't, because it was true. Somehow, impossibly, the Vryn hegemony was losing a war to a species they'd considered barely worth noticing. What do the humans want? He asked finally. They haven't said, the aide replied. They just keep attacking. No demands, no negotiations, no communication beyond tactical warnings to our civilian populations to evacuate military zones. That was almost worse than demands. Demands could be negotiated, compromised on, refused. But the humans weren't asking for anything. They were just systematically destroying the Vryn military capability, one target at a time with terrifying patience. For the first time in his long life, High Executor Krath felt fear. Major Alex Reeves floated in the darkness of space, his combat suit systems running on minimal power. Around him, 11 other members of his Reaper team did the same, invisible ghosts waiting in the void. They had been here for 6 hours, not moving, barely breathing, waiting for their target. The Vryn supply convoy appeared exactly on schedule, emerging from jump space with the flash of exotic particles. 12 massive cargo ships protected by 4 cruisers. The convoy was carrying weapons, ammunition, and replacement parts for the Vryn 7th Fleet. It would never reach its destination. Hold, Reeves whispered into his secure channel. His team didn't respond. They didn't need to. They'd trained together for 3 years, lived together, fought together. They knew the drill. The convoy passed within 2 kilometers of their position. Still they waited. Patience was the Reaper creed. Most species couldn't do what they did. Most species couldn't shut down their bodies so completely, couldn't control their fear, couldn't wait in absolute stillness for hours or even days. But humans were persistence hunters. Waiting was what they did best. Now, Reeves said. The team activated their propulsion packs, vectoring toward the cargo ships at high speed. The Vrin sensors never saw them. Human stealth technology had evolved from submarines that hunted in Earth's oceans, from aircraft that flew invisible to radar, from soldiers who learned to move without sound. The suits the Reapers wore absorbed or deflected every scan the Vrin could make. Reeves reached the hull of the lead cargo ship and attached a breaching charge. His team did the same across all 12 ships. The charges were small, precise, designed to create a hull breach without destroying the ship. The Vrin aboard would have maybe 30 seconds of warning before decompression started, more than enough time to get to emergency shelters. Humanity might be at war, but they still valued life, even enemy life. The charges blew simultaneously. Atmosphere vented into space. Reeves and his team moved through the breach into the cargo hold. The Vrin crew were already sealing themselves in protected compartments exactly as expected. The Reapers ignored them and went straight for the cargo. Antimatter charges, the kind that left nothing behind. Reeves placed his charges on the ammunition stores, the weapons crates, the parts containers. His team did the same throughout the hold. Timer set for 5 minutes. More than enough time for the Vrin crew to evacuate in emergency pods. Charges set. His team reported one by one. Extract, Reeves ordered. They were back in space 30 seconds later, propelling away at maximum speed. Behind them, the cargo ship's crews were abandoning ship, their escape pods launching into the void. The Vrin cruisers were trying to figure out what had happened, their sensors finally detecting the human presence but too late to respond. The antimatter charges detonated. 12 cargo ships ceased to exist, converted to pure energy in microseconds. The shockwave pushed the escape pods away, faster than their engines could manage, but intact. The Vrin crews would survive to be picked up by their own forces. They'd survive to spread stories about human soldiers who appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. That was part of the strategy, too. Make them afraid. Make them paranoid. Make them check every shadow, question every sensor reading. Fear was a weapon as powerful as any missile. Reeves and his team rendezvoused with their stealth ship 3 hours later. It was one of humanity's most classified assets. A vessel that could slip past any detection system. The pilot, Commander Lisa Zhang, greeted them with her usual grim smile. "Nice work," she said. "That's the 3rd convoy this week. The Vrin are going to have some serious supply problems." "Good," Reeves replied, removing his helmet. His face was drawn, tired. He was 42 years old and had been a soldier for 20 of those years. He'd joined the Reaper program because someone had to do the hard jobs, the missions no one wanted to talk about. He'd accepted that burden, but it still weighed on him. "Orders just came in," Zhang continued. "High Command wants us to hit a different kind of target." "What kind?" Reeves asked. Zhang pulled up a holographic display. A face appeared, scaled and alien, but the expression somehow familiar, arrogant, cruel. Fleet Commander Rax. He survived the battle at New Brisbane. Now he's commanding the Vrin 9th Fleet from a mobile command ship. High Command wants him taken alive. Reeves studied the image. Why alive? They want him to stand trial for the New Brisbane massacre. 2.3 million counts of murder. The team was silent. Finally, Reeves nodded. "Then we'll get him. But we do it clean. No unnecessary casualties. We're not like them." "No," Zhang agreed. "We're not." Meanwhile, in Vrin space, the war was taking a psychological toll that went beyond destroyed ships and military losses. The Vrin were a proud species, conquerors who had never known defeat. For 15,000 years they had expanded their territory, subjugated other races, and enforced their will through superior military might. The idea that they could lose, truly lose, had never occurred to them. Now it was all they thought about. Human ships appeared without warning, struck with devastating efficiency, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. No Vrin vessel was safe. Transport ships vanished. Military convoys were destroyed. Even warships in supposedly secure sectors found themselves under attack. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. On Vryn Prime, the hegemony's homeworld, public opinion was shifting. News of the disasters couldn't be suppressed. Too many families had lost members. Too many military units had been wiped out. The civilians started asking questions. Why had they attacked the humans? Why had their government started a war with a species they clearly didn't understand? High Executor Krath tried to maintain control through propaganda, claiming the setbacks were temporary, that the Vryn would triumph in the end. But his own military commanders were losing faith. In war councils, they spoke in whispers about negotiating peace, about finding a way to end this before it destroyed them completely. Admiral Chen received these intelligence reports with satisfaction, but also caution. The goal wasn't to destroy the Vryn civilization. The goal was to make them stop, to ensure they never threatened human colonies again, and to send a message to every other species in the galaxy. Leave humanity alone. But she also knew that a cornered enemy was dangerous. The Vryn still had thousands of ships, billions of soldiers, and weapons humanity had never encountered. If they became desperate enough, if they decided that if they were going down they'd take humanity with them, the cost could be catastrophic. We need to give them an out, she told her senior staff during a secure conference. A way to surrender that preserves some dignity. Otherwise they'll fight to the last ship and that serves no one. Respectfully, Admiral, one of her commanders objected. They butchered New Brisbane. They murdered millions. They deserve no dignity. I agree, Chen said. But war isn't about what people deserve. It's about achieving objectives with minimum casualties. Our objective is to make them stop, not to commit genocide. The moment we forget that, we become what they thought we were. She drafted a proposal and sent it through diplomatic channels. The Vryn could surrender their military forces in the Outer Reach, pay reparations for New Brisbane, and submit their leadership to war crimes trials. In exchange, humanity would cease offensive operations and help rebuild Vryn infrastructure. The offer was rejected within hours. Krath called it an insult, a demand for total capitulation. He vowed to fight on until victory or death. Then we'll have to make him understand, Chen said quietly. Target the Vryn homeworld, not to attack it, but to demonstrate we could if we chose to. The operation was called Sword of Damocles. Admiral Chen personally led a fleet of 60 ships into Vryn space, not hiding, not using stealth. They wanted to be seen. They jumped into the Vryn Prime system and took up positions above the homeworld. Weapons powered but not armed. Engines running, clearly capable of bombarding the planet below. Every civilian on Vryn Prime could look up and see the human ships in their sky. Ships they'd been told were primitive, weak, no threat. Ships that had somehow fought through the entire Vryn military, and now sat above their capital like predators toying with prey. Chen broadcasted on all frequencies. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Confederacy. We are here to make a point. We could destroy your world. We have the weapons. We have the capacity. But we won't. Because unlike your leaders, we don't make war on civilians. We fight to protect our people, not to exterminate others. She paused. Your military attacked our colony. They killed 2.3 million civilians, including children, in a deliberate act of terror. They thought we were weak, that we couldn't respond. They were wrong. Now we give you one chance. Surrender your military forces. Submit your leadership to justice. Accept peace. Or watch as we dismantle your military capability ship by ship, base by base, until you have nothing left to fight with. The siege of Rax began not with explosions, but with silence. Admiral Chen's fleet of 200 ships took up positions around the Vryn homeworld, their weapons aimed but not firing. They simply waited, cutting off all traffic in and out of the system. No ships could leave. No supplies could arrive. The blockade was perfect, absolute, and terrifying in its patience. On the planet below, 16 billion Vryn watched their sky fill with human warships. They had been told for weeks that their military was winning, that the humans were on the verge of defeat. Now the truth was undeniable. The enemy was at their doorstep and nothing stood between them and annihilation. High Executor Krath sat in his fortress palace, surrounded by what remained of his guard. The Council of Wardens had collapsed. Half of them had fled off-world before the blockade. The other half had been arrested by their own people. The citizens of Vryn Prime had had enough of his leadership. A junior officer entered nervously. High Executor, the humans are broadcasting again. Krath's scaled fists clenched. What do they want now? They're not addressing you, sir. They're speaking directly to our people. The holographic display activated. Admiral Chen's face appeared, and this time she wasn't speaking in the cold, clinical tone of a military commander. Her voice was measured, almost gentle. "People of Vryn Prime," she began. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chen. For the past 9 weeks, your world has been at war with mine. Your leaders told you this war was necessary, that humans were a threat to your security, that conquest was the only path. They lied to you." Images appeared beside her face. Footage from New Brisbane before the attack. Cities gleaming in the sun. Children playing in parks. Families at markets. Normal life. This was New Brisbane, one of our colonies. 2.3 million people lived here. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, artists. They had dreams, families, futures. The images changed. Now they showed the bombardment. The fires. The destruction. Your military took all of that away in a single day. They killed everyone. Not because those people were a threat, not because they were soldiers, but because your leaders wanted to send a message. The footage continued. Bodies in the streets, collapsed buildings, a child's toy melting in radioactive fire. Krath felt something cold in his chest. He'd ordered that attack. He'd watched the reports with satisfaction, but seeing it like this through human eyes, it looked different. Chen continued. "We could do the same to you. Right now, we have the weapons. We have the position. We could turn your cities to ash, your oceans to steam, your world to a lifeless rock. And by the rules of war that your leaders started, we'd be justified." She paused. "But we won't. Do you know why?" The screen split. On one side, images of New Brisbane's destruction. On the other, images of human rescue operations. Human medics treating wounded Vryn prisoners. Human engineers rebuilding destroyed infrastructure on captured worlds. Human soldiers sharing their rations with Vryn civilians trapped in war zones. "Because we're not like your leaders," Chen said simply. "We don't make war on civilians. We don't commit genocide. We fight to protect our people, not to exterminate others. That's what makes us different. That's what makes us human." She leaned forward, her gaze direct and unwavering. "Your leaders started this war. They made the choice to attack us. They gambled that we were weak and harmless. They lost that gamble. Now they hide in their fortresses while you pay the price. But you don't have to keep paying. You can choose differently." The broadcast ended, but the message was clear. Chen wasn't speaking to Krath. She was speaking to the people who could remove him from power. Within hours, the riots began. Not small protests, but mass demonstrations. Millions of Vryn took to the streets, demanding an end to the war, demanding Krath's removal, demanding peace. The military forces still loyal to Krath tried to stop them, but the soldiers were tired too. Many simply stood aside and let the civilians pass. In orbit, Admiral Chen watched the chaos with mixed feelings. This was what she'd hoped for. A popular uprising that would remove Krath without requiring humanity to invade the planet. But she also felt the weight of responsibility. Those people down there were rioting because she'd put them in an impossible position. They were rebelling against their own government because she'd left them no other choice. "Admiral," her communication officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's not from High Command. It's from someone calling themselves the Provisional Council. Put them through," Chen ordered. A Vryn appeared on screen, older than most, with scars across his scales that spoke of past battles. "Admiral Chen, I am General Vex, formerly of the Vryn 4th Legion. I speak for a coalition of military officers, civil administrators, and civilian leaders who have formed to take control of our government. High Executor Krath's authority is no longer recognized. We wish to negotiate a ceasefire." Chen studied him carefully. "What are your terms?" "We have none," Vex said, surprising her. "We have no leverage. You hold our world hostage. You've destroyed our military capability. We cannot fight you, and even if we could, we should not. This war was wrong from the beginning. We ask only for the chance to surrender with some measure of dignity, and to protect our civilian population." It was the first time any Vryn had admitted the war was wrong. Chen felt something shift in her chest. This was the moment Doctrine Midnight had been designed for, the point where strength could transform into peace. "Here are my terms," Chen said. "All Vryn military forces will stand down immediately. All warships will be powered down and turned over to human control. High Executor Krath and all officers directly involved in the New Brisbane attack will be arrested, and turned over for trial. Your government will pay reparations for the damages and deaths caused. In exchange, we will lift the blockade, provide humanitarian aid, and assist in rebuilding your infrastructure. We will not occupy your world. We will not impose our government on you. We will help you recover and then leave. Vex was silent for a long moment. You would help us? After everything we've done? Yes, Chen said, because this war needs to end. And it needs to end in a way that doesn't just create the seeds for the next one. Your people are not our enemy. Your leaders were. I will present your terms to the Provisional Council, Vex said, but I believe they will be accepted. The transmission ended. Around the bridge, Chen's officers were quiet. Finally, her executive officer spoke up. Admiral, do you really think we can trust them? No, Chen admitted. But we can give them a reason to be trustworthy. Fear only works for so long. Eventually, you need to build something more stable. The surrender came 3 days later. Vrin warships across known space powered down their weapons and waited for human forces to take control. It was the largest military capitulation in galactic history. Over 4,000 ships, millions of soldiers all standing down simultaneously. Krath refused to surrender peacefully. He barricaded himself in his fortress palace with 2,000 loyal guards, vowing to fight to the last. Admiral Chen made one final attempt at peaceful resolution, broadcasting directly to the fortress. High Executor Krath, this is over. Your people have chosen peace. Your military has surrendered. You've lost. Come out peacefully, stand trial, and at least face justice with dignity. Krath's response was to fire on civilian protesters outside his fortress. 57 Vrin died before Chen made her decision. Deploy the Reapers, she ordered. Take him alive if possible. If not, end this quickly with minimum casualties. Major Reeves and his team infiltrated the fortress that night. They'd studied its layout for weeks, mapped every corridor, identified every guard position. The assault was textbook perfect. Non-lethal gas flooded the ventilation systems. Automated defenses were hacked and disabled. Guards were neutralized with stunning precision. Reeves found Krath in his command center alone, staring at displays showing his empire's collapse. The High Executor didn't even turn around when Reeves entered. You should have killed me from orbit, Krath said quietly. It would have been cleaner. Maybe, Reeves replied, his weapon trained on the Vrin leader. But we're not in the business of clean kills. We're in the business of justice. You ordered the murder of 2.3 million civilians. You're going to answer for that. To whom? Krath turned to face him. A human court? Your species decides my guilt? No, Reeves said. An independent tribunal. Judges from neutral species. Full legal representation. All the rights you denied the people of New Brisbane. That's the difference between us and you. Krath laughed bitterly. You've won, human. Why bother with the theater of justice? Because it's not theater, Reeves replied. It's principle. It's what separates war from murder. Soldiers from butchers, civilization from chaos. You wouldn't understand that. But you're going to learn. Krath was taken into custody without further resistance. Fleet Commander Rax, captured weeks earlier, was already in human custody. Together they would stand trial for war crimes. The proceedings would take months, involve evidence from thousands of witnesses, and result in convictions that would become precedent for galactic law. But that was for the future. Right now, Admiral Chen had a more immediate concern. She had an entire planet to help recover from war, and she had to do it in a way that turned former enemies into future partners. She addressed the Galactic Council one final time with the war officially over. Ambassador Webb stood beside her as she spoke, and representatives from every major species listened. 9 weeks ago, the Vrin hegemony attacked our colony and killed millions of our people. They thought we were weak. They thought we couldn't respond. They were wrong. Chen's voice was steady, her gaze moving from delegate to delegate. We revealed capabilities we'd hidden for 3 centuries. We demonstrated that humanity is not harmless, not primitive, not weak. We won this war decisively. She paused, letting that sink in. But winning a war is easy. Building a lasting peace is hard. The Vrin people are not our enemies. Their leaders led them into disaster, and they paid for that leadership with their military defeat. Now they're rebuilding under new government, and we're helping them. Not because we have to, not because they deserve it, but because peace requires more than just destroying your enemy's ability to fight. It requires giving them a reason not to. A delegate from a species that had remained neutral spoke up. Admiral, your display of force has changed the galactic balance of power. Many species are now afraid of humanity. What assurances can you give that you won't use your military advantage to conquer others as the Vryn tried to do? It was the question Chen had been expecting. I can give you the same assurance we've given for 300 years. Our word. We didn't want this war. We tried every diplomatic solution. When forced to fight, we did so with restraint even when revenge would have been easier. We targeted military installations, not civilian populations. We offered surrender terms that preserved dignity. We're helping our enemy rebuild. She leaned forward. Judge us by our actions, not your fears. We're not conquerors. We're not exterminators. We're just people trying to live in peace but willing to fight when that peace is threatened. And if another species threatens you? The delegate pressed. Chen's expression hardened. Then they'll learn the same lesson the Vryn learned. We don't start wars, but we will finish them. The session ended with no consensus, no grand declarations, but seeds had been planted. Some species would choose to fear humanity. Others would choose to respect them. Some might even choose friendship. Time would tell which path the galaxy would take. Back on Earth in the memorial being built for New Brisbane's victims, President Okafor stood before the still empty walls where 2.3 million names would eventually be carved. Beside her stood Chen, back from the front lines, still in uniform. Was it worth it? Okafor asked quietly. All those lives lost, all that destruction, all that fear we've created? Chen was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she admitted. We saved our colonies. We proved we can't be pushed around. We set precedents for justice and restraint even in war. But we also revealed ourselves in ways we can never take back. The galaxy knows what we're capable of now. That knowledge is going to shape everything that comes next. Regrets? Okafor asked. About the war? No. We did what we had to do, and we did it as ethically as possible under the circumstances. About the necessity of the war? Yes, every single day. Chen turned to look at the president. But that's good, isn't it? The day we stop regretting war is the day we become what the Vryn thought we were. Okafor nodded slowly. Come on, Admiral. We have work to do. The easy part is over. Now we have to figure out how humanity lives in a galaxy that fears us. As they walked away from the memorial, neither noticed a small figure watching from the shadows. A child, no more than 6 years old, looking at where the names would go. She'd lost her parents on New Brisbane. She'd been off-world for school when the attack came. Now she stood alone, wondering what she was supposed to do with all the anger and pain inside her. A hand touched her shoulder gently. She looked up to see an older woman, someone she didn't recognize. It hurts, doesn't it? The woman said softly. Losing people you love, wondering why it happened, feeling angry at the universe. The girl nodded, not trusting herself to speak. My name is Sarah, the woman continued. I lost someone too a long time ago. My brother. He was a soldier. He died protecting people he'd never met on a world far from Earth, and I was so angry. I wanted revenge. I wanted someone to pay. She knelt down to the girl's level. But do you know what I learned? Revenge doesn't bring them back. It doesn't make the pain go away. It just creates more pain for other people. Then what do? The girl asked, tears streaming down her face. We remember them, Sarah said. We honor them by being better than the people who hurt us. We make sure their deaths meant something by building a world where it doesn't happen again. She squeezed the girl's shoulder gently. It's not fair. It's not enough. But it's all we have. The girl was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, What's your name again? Sarah Chen. The girl's eyes widened. She recognized that name. Everyone did. You're the Admiral. You're the one who... Yes, Chen said simply. I'm the one who fought the war. And now I'm the one who has to live with what that means. Just like you. Just like everyone who survived. She stood up. Come on, let me buy you some ice cream. And if you want to talk or cry or just sit in silence, I'll be there. They walked away together, a warrior and a child, both carrying scars from a war that should never have happened, both trying to figure out how to live with what they'd lost and what they'd learned. 1 year after the war's end, Ambassador Marcus Webb walked through the rebuilt streets of New Vryn City on Vrax. The capital had been renamed after the revolution, a symbolic break from the old regime. Around him, Vryn citizens went about their daily lives, shopping, working, living. Human engineers worked alongside Vryn construction crews. rebuilding infrastructure destroyed in the brief siege. Children of both species played together in parks, somehow managing to communicate despite different languages and biology. It was strange how quickly things could change. A year ago, these people had been enemies. Now they were something else. Not quite friends, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of something better. Webb was here for the trial. It had taken 12 months to prepare, to gather evidence, to ensure every legal standard was met. The Galactic Council had established an independent tribunal with judges from 7 neutral species. Krath and 37 other Vryn officers stood accused of war crimes, crimes against sentience, and genocide. The courthouse was a new building, designed specifically for this purpose. Webb took his seat in the observation gallery alongside representatives from dozens of worlds. The proceedings were being broadcast across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. High Executor Krath was brought in first. He looked smaller somehow, diminished without his armor and weapons. His scales had dulled in captivity, but his eyes still burned with defiant pride. He refused legal representation at first, claiming no alien court had authority over him. Eventually, he'd accepted a defense team, not because he believed in the process, but because his own people had demanded it. Even now, there were Vryn who saw him as a patriot, a leader who had simply been outmatched. The chief prosecutor was a Kelthrin named Jathik, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline form. Its voice resonated through the chamber as it laid out the charges. The prosecution will demonstrate that the defendants, under the command of High Executor Krath, deliberately targeted civilian populations in violation of all recognized laws of war. We will show that the attack on New Brisbane was not a military necessity, but an act of terrorism designed to intimidate humanity into surrender. The evidence was overwhelming. Communications intercepts showing Krath ordering the attack specifically on civilian targets. Testimony from Vryn officers who had carried out the bombardment. Forensic analysis of the weapons used, proving they were designed to maximize civilian casualties. And most damning, footage from Krath's own flagship showing him watching the destruction with satisfaction. Webb watched as survivor after survivor from New Brisbane testified. Families torn apart, children orphaned, entire communities erased. Some spoke with anger, others with grief so profound it filled the courtroom with silence. The Vryn judges listened, their expressions unreadable, but Webb could see them struggling with what they were hearing. This was their species' crime, their military, their leaders. Krath's defense argued that he had acted in what he believed were the best interests of his people, that humanity had represented a threat, that his actions were within the bounds of military necessity. It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. The evidence was too clear. The crime was too obvious. On the 15th day of the trial, the prosecution called its final witness. Admiral Sarah Chen took the stand, sworn in according to the customs of 7 different species, and faced the tribunal. Admiral Chen, Jathik began, please describe humanity's response to the attack on New Brisbane. Chen spoke clearly without emotion. We activated Doctrine Midnight, our contingency plan for existential warfare. We revealed military capabilities we had kept hidden for 3 centuries. We struck at Vryn military assets across their territory, destroying ships, bases, supply lines, and command infrastructure. Our goal was to eliminate their ability to threaten us while minimizing civilian casualties. And did you succeed in that goal? Yes. Our intelligence estimates that Vryn civilian casualties during the entire war numbered less than 3,000. Most of those were accidents or occurred in military facilities where civilians were present. We specifically avoided targeting population centers. Krath's defense attorney, Vryn himself, stood up. Admiral, isn't it true that your forces destroyed over 4,000 Vryn military vessels? That's hundreds of thousands of deaths. Military deaths, Chen corrected. Soldiers who chose to serve in a military that attacked our civilians. They were legitimate targets under any definition of warfare. But you could have ended the war much faster by targeting our cities, couldn't you? By doing what we did to New Brisbane? Chen met his gaze steadily. Yes, we could have. We chose not to. That's the difference between military action and genocide. The defense attorney pushed harder. You claim moral superiority, Admiral, but you still killed hundreds of thousands of my people. How is that justice? It's not justice, Chen said quietly. It's war. Justice is what happens here, in this courtroom, where the people responsible for starting that war face the consequences of their actions. The trial lasted another month. The tribunal heard from historians, military experts, legal scholars, and diplomats. They reviewed thousands of hours of evidence, examined precedents from 100 different species' legal traditions, and debated for days in private session. When they returned to deliver their verdict, the courtroom was packed. Webb found himself holding his breath. The chief judge, an ancient being from a species so old they'd forgotten their homeworld, spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the air itself. "We have reviewed all evidence and testimony. We have considered the arguments of both prosecution and defense. We have consulted our respective legal traditions and our understanding of universal law. We find the defendants guilty of war crimes and crimes against sentience. High Executor Krath is specifically guilty of ordering the genocide of New Brisbane's civilian population." Krath showed no reaction. He'd known this was coming. However, the judge continued, "We must also address the broader questions raised by this case. The Vryn military acted under orders from their civilian government. The civilian government acted on beliefs about human weakness that were, at the time, shared by much of the galactic community. While this does not excuse their crimes, it contextualizes them. We therefore sentence High Executor Krath to life imprisonment, to be served in a facility on a neutral world. His co-defendants receive sentences ranging from 20 to 50 years, also in neutral custody." There was murmuring in the courtroom. Some had wanted execution. Others had wanted harsher terms. But the tribunal had chosen a middle path, one that acknowledged guilt while avoiding the appearance of victor's justice. "Furthermore," the judge said, "we recommend that the Galactic Council adopt formal laws of warfare, codifying protections for civilians and establishing clear consequences for violations. Let this trial serve not just as punishment but as precedent. Let it mark the moment when the galaxy chose law over chaos." The gavel fell. The trial was over. Webb felt exhausted and somehow unsatisfied. Justice had been done, but it felt inadequate measured against 2.3 million lives lost. Maybe it always would be. He left the courthouse and walked to a memorial park the humans had built. It contained a wall with every name from New Brisbane carved into black stone. 2.3 million names. It took hours just to walk past them all. Webb had done it once, reading every name, remembering that each one had been a person with dreams and fears and people who loved them. He found Admiral Chen there, standing in front of the wall, her hand resting on a particular section of names. "I come here every week," she said without turning around. "Sometimes I think I'm looking for forgiveness. Sometimes I think I'm just making sure I don't forget." "Forget what?" Webb asked. "What this cost. What it means to use the kind of power we revealed. Every time I walked onto a bridge and gave orders that killed thousands of people, I told myself it was necessary, that we were defending our people, that we were doing it the right way. And all of that is true, but it doesn't change the fact that I ordered deaths, that I'm responsible for families on Vrax who will never see their loved ones again." She turned to face him. "I won the war, Marcus, but I don't think I'll ever win peace with myself." Webb had no answer for that. What could he say? That it wasn't her fault? It was, at least in part. That it was necessary? Perhaps, but necessity didn't erase responsibility. That she'd done the right thing? Maybe, but the right thing in war still involves death and destruction. They stood together in silence for a while. Finally, Chen spoke again. "I'm retiring. The promotion to Fleet Marshal came through last week. I turned it down. Someone else can command the fleet now, someone who doesn't carry this particular weight." "What will you do?" Webb asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe teach. Maybe just disappear for a while. Maybe spend time with that girl from New Brisbane, the one who lost her parents. She writes to me sometimes, asks questions about the war, about what it means, about how to live with anger." Chen smiled slightly. "I don't have good answers, but at least we're asking the questions together." Back on Earth, in the council chambers in Geneva, President Okafor addressed the human government for the last time before her term ended. "We've survived the war," she said. "We've proven that humanity can defend itself. We've established justice for the crimes committed against us. But now comes the harder part, deciding who we want to be in a galaxy that knows what we're capable of." She pulled up a holographic display showing the current political map of the galaxy. Human space was marked in blue, expanded slightly to include the outer reach colonies that had been disputed. Vrin space was in red, noticeably smaller than before. Around them, dozens of other species in various colors, all watching to see what humanity would do next. Some species want to ally with us out of fear, Okafor continued. They see our military power and want to be on our side rather than against us. Others are proposing defensive pacts to protect themselves from us. Still others are trying to isolate us, to quarantine humanity before we become a threat to everyone. All of these responses are based on fear, and fear is a poor foundation for lasting peace. She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. So I propose something different. We offer the galaxy not a threat, but a partnership. We share some of our technology, not weapons, but medical advances, agricultural techniques, engineering solutions to common problems. We open our universities to students from other species. We establish cultural exchange programs. We show them that humanity is more than just our military capability. A representative from the Mars delegation stood up. Madam President, with respect, we just fought a war because someone thought we were weak. If we start giving away our advantages, won't we be inviting another attack? Perhaps, Okafor admitted. But consider the alternative. If we hoard our technology, if we remain isolated behind our military strength, we confirm every fear the galaxy has about us. We become the thing they're afraid of. Eventually, they'll unite against us, and even our capabilities might not be enough against a unified galaxy. But if we demonstrate that we're willing to be partners, not conquerors, we might actually achieve what we wanted 300 years ago, a peaceful place among the stars. The debate lasted for hours. Some wanted to maintain maximum military advantage. Others wanted to retreat into isolation. But eventually, Okafor's proposal passed by a narrow margin. Humanity would try to build bridges, not just fortresses. The first test of this new policy came sooner than expected. The Kelthran Collective, a mid-sized power that had remained neutral during the war, sent a delegation to Earth with a request. One of their colony worlds was suffering from a plague, a viral infection that their medical technology couldn't cure. They'd heard that human genetic engineering was advanced. Would humanity help? The request divided public opinion on Earth. Why should they help aliens when New Brisbane was still rebuilding? Why risk human resources for people who had stood by while the Vrin attacked? But President Okafor saw an opportunity. Send our best medical team, she ordered. Full resources, no restrictions. Show them what human compassion looks like. Dr. Elena Volkov, the scientist who had developed many of Dr. Midnight's weapon systems, led the mission. She'd been looking for a way to balance the scales of what she'd created. Saving lives seemed like a good place to start. The Kelthran plague world was called Synthesis, a beautiful place with crystalline cities and energy fields that glowed in the darkness. But the plague had devastated the population. Millions were sick. Thousands were dying every day. The Kelthran had tried everything their science could offer. Nothing worked. Volkov's team set up a mobile research facility and went to work. They studied the virus, mapped its genetic structure, tested thousands of potential treatments. The Kelthran scientists worked alongside them, sharing data, learning human techniques. It took 3 weeks of constant work, but eventually they found a cure. The treatment was simple once they understood the mechanism, a gene therapy that boosted the Kelthran immune system, combined with a targeted antiviral compound. Within days of the first treatments, patients were recovering. Within weeks, the plague was under control. Within 2 months, it was eradicated. The Kelthran Collective's response was overwhelming gratitude. They offered trade agreements, military alliance, anything humanity wanted. Volkov refused most of it. We didn't do this for payment, she told their leaders. We did it because it was right, because we're capable of more than just destruction. When news of the mission spread across the galaxy, something shifted. Species that had been afraid of humanity started to reconsider. Maybe these humans were more complex than they'd thought. Maybe they could be more than just warriors. Back on Vrax, General Vex, now the elected leader of the new Vrin Democratic Council, worked with human advisors to rebuild his world. It was strange accepting help from the people who'd destroyed their military. But the humans weren't conquerors. They genuinely wanted to help. They shared engineering expertise to repair damaged infrastructure. They provided medical supplies for the wounded. They even helped establish new schools to educate the next generation. Vex met regularly with Major Alex Reeves, the Reaper team leader who had captured Krath. An odd friendship had developed between them. A soldier from each side who understood what war really cost. Why are you helping us? Vex asked one day as they surveyed a construction project. Your people would understand if you left us to struggle. Reeves was quiet for a moment, watching Vryn and human workers cooperating on the building. Because war doesn't end when the shooting stops, he said finally. It ends when former enemies can work together, when the next generation doesn't inherit hatred, when people choose peace over revenge. We fought you because we had to. We're helping you because we want to. Your species is strange, Vex said, something almost like affection in his voice. Capable of such violence, yet reaching for such peace. That's what makes us human, Reeves replied. We're complicated. We contain multitudes. We can be the worst thing you've ever seen, or the best friend you never knew you needed. The choice of which one you get depends on how you approach us. 6 months later, the Vryn Democratic Council made an unprecedented announcement. They were applying to join the Galactic Council as a full member, but with a condition. They wanted to sponsor humanity's elevation to permanent council status as well. The proposal shocked the galaxy. A year ago, these species had been at war. Now the Vryn were advocating for their former enemy. It made no sense by traditional political logic. But that was the point. This was something new. The vote took place on Galactic Council Station Theta, the same place where Krath had issued his ultimatum so long ago. Ambassador Webb stood before the assembled delegates once more, but this time the atmosphere was different. Respect had replaced contempt. Caution had replaced dismissal. Ambassador Webb, the council chairman said, the Vryn have proposed that humanity be granted permanent council membership with full voting rights. This would make your species one of only 7 with such status. Before we vote, the council would like to hear from you. What kind of member would humanity be? What would you bring to this body? Webb had prepared for this moment. Rehearsed speeches about human values, human capabilities, human intentions. But standing there looking at representatives from dozens of worlds, he decided to speak from the heart instead. Honestly, we'd probably be difficult, he said. Several delegates made sounds of surprise. We'd question decisions we thought were unjust. We'd advocate strongly for our positions. We'd push for changes to systems that seem unfair. We're not a quiet species, and we're not good at accepting things just because that's how it's always been done. He paused, letting that sink in. But we'd also be committed partners. When the Kelthrin needed medical help, we provided it without expecting anything in return. When the Vryn needed rebuilding assistance, we gave it despite our history. When we see suffering, we try to end it. When we see injustice, we try to fix it. Sometimes we succeed. Sometimes we fail. But we keep trying. Webb looked directly at the Vryn delegation where Vex sat with his own people. A year ago, the Vryn attacked us. They killed millions of our people. We could have responded with genocide. We could have wiped them out and taken their territory. Instead, we responded with precisely calibrated force, targeted only their military capability, and then helped them rebuild. Why? Because we believe that today's enemy can become tomorrow's friend. Because we believe in redemption. Because we believe that sentient beings are capable of growth and change. He turned back to the chairman. So yes, we'd be difficult council members. We'd challenge you, push you, probably annoy you regularly. But we'd also stand with you. When threats emerge, we'd help face them. When disasters strike, we'd help respond. When tough decisions need to be made, we'd help make them. That's what we'd bring to this council. Commitment, capability, and the absolute refusal to give up on the idea that different species can work together for something better than war. The vote wasn't unanimous. Some species still feared humanity too much. Others resented the rapid rise of a relatively young species. But when the ballots were counted, humanity had won membership with 68% approval. It was enough. As the session ended and delegates filed out, Zixthar approached Webb one final time. The ancient architect seemed pleased, his shimmering form pulsing with warm colors. My people watched yours for 50,000 years, he said softly. We wondered if you would survive long enough to reach the stars. We wondered what you would become if you did. Now I know. He placed a hand, barely substantial, on Webb's shoulder. You've become exactly what we hoped for. Dangerous enough to defend yourselves, wise enough to know when not to, strong enough to win wars, mature enough to build peace. Welcome to the Council, Ambassador. Welcome to the galactic community. Truly this time. Webb felt something release in his chest, a tension he hadn't fully realized he'd been carrying. For 300 years, humanity had wondered if they really belonged out here among the stars. Now, finally, they had their answer. Not through conquest, not through submission, but through demonstrating that they could be both strong and good, capable of terrible violence and remarkable compassion, willing to fight when necessary but always reaching for peace. He walked through the station's observation deck, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, New Brisbane was being rebuilt. Vryn and human children were playing together in parks on Vrax. Medical teams were saving lives on Kelthran worlds. Soldiers from a dozen species were training together in new joint defense initiatives. And across the galaxy, species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now watched them with respect, caution, and in some cases, hope. The war had changed everything. Doctrine Midnight had revealed humanity's true nature, and that revelation could never be undone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was better to be known as they truly were. Flawed, complicated, dangerous, but striving always to be better than their worst impulses. Major Reeves, now retired from active service, opened a school on Earth for children who'd lost parents in the war, human and Vryn both, learning together, playing together, slowly healing together. He'd spent 20 years learning how to be a soldier. Now he was learning how to be a teacher. It was harder in some ways, but more rewarding in others. Admiral Chen accepted a position as a professor at the Naval Academy, teaching strategy and ethics to the next generation of officers. On the first day of class, she told her students, "War is easy. Any idiot with a weapon can kill. What's hard is knowing when to fight, how to fight, and when to stop fighting. That's what I'm here to teach you. Not how to win wars, but how to win peace." Dr. Volkov continued her medical work, developing treatments for diseases across multiple species. She'd created weapons of terrible power. Now she created cures. It didn't balance the scales, not completely, but it helped. Every life saved was a small redemption. And on New Brisbane, in the rebuilt capital city, a memorial stood where 2.3 million names were carved in stone. Beside it, a new city grew, vibrant and alive, a testament to resilience and the refusal to let tragedy define the future. Human and Vryn worked there together, building something new from the ashes of something lost. The galaxy had learned a lesson. Don't provoke humanity. Don't threaten them. Don't assume their patience is weakness. But the lesson wasn't about fear. It was about understanding. Humanity didn't start the war. They'd tried every option to avoid it. But when forced to fight, they'd done so with devastating efficiency and remarkable restraint. More importantly, they'd shown that after the shooting stopped, after the treaties were signed, after the trials concluded, there was still work to do. The work of reconciliation, the work of rebuilding, the work of transforming enemies into friends, fear into respect, war into peace. Years later, a young Vryn student would visit Earth as part of a cultural exchange program. She'd stand in front of the New Brisbane Memorial, reading the names carved in stone, trying to understand how her people had done something so terrible, and how humanity had responded not with equal hatred but with justice and mercy. An elderly woman would approach her, a human with white hair and eyes that had seen too much. "It's overwhelming, isn't it?" the woman would say. "All those names, all those lives. I'm sorry," the young Vryn would whisper. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry." "I know you are," the woman would reply. "And that matters. Your generation didn't start this war, but you're inheriting its legacy. What you do with that legacy, that's what determines the future." "What should I do?" the student would ask. "Live well," the woman would say simply. "Be kind, stand up against injustice. Help others when you can. Remember what happened here, but don't let it define you. Build something better." She'd pause. "And maybe someday when someone asks you about the war between humans and Vryn, you can tell them how it ended. Not with extinction or conquest, but with two species learning to be better than their worst moments." The young Vryn would return to her homeworld carrying that message, and she'd share it with others. And slowly, generation by generation, the galaxy would change. Not because of fear, not because of force, but because enough people from enough species decided that peace was worth the effort. The final words from Human Command had been, "You want to start this war? Then see what follows." What followed was victory. What followed was justice. What followed was mercy. What followed was rebuilding. What followed was hope. What followed was humanity. in all its complicated, contradictory, magnificent reality, showing the galaxy not what monsters they could be, but what they chose to be instead. And that made all the difference.